Lyra walked slowly through the crowded spaceport, her steps uneven and shaky. Every movement sent a sharp jolt of pain shooting up her legs. The implants that once made her fast and strong now hissed with static and gave off small sparks. The glowing lines along her thighs, once smooth and steady, flickered like dying lights. Around her, traders shouted prices, cargo drones zipped past, and travelers rushed to catch their ships. Nobody looked at her for more than a second. She was just another broken thing in a place where everyone was too busy to care. Her stomach was tight with hunger, but her mind was focused on something else, finding someone, anyone, who could fix her legs. She had already tried 3 repair shops that day, and all 3 had told her the same thing. No credits, no service. She stopped outside the 4th shop, a narrow doorway lit by a flickering neon sign. The air inside smelled of burnt metal. Behind the counter stood a short alien with wide eyes and 3 hands. "My implants," she said, pointing at her legs. "They're failing. I can't walk much longer." The alien glanced at the flickering glow and shook his head before she even finished speaking. "Special parts? Expensive parts? You have the money." "Psh, I don't," she admitted, her voice small. "But I can work. I can." The alien waved one hand dismissively. "No credits, no service. Try the scrap dealers." She stepped back into the noise of the spaceport, the weight of his words pressing down on her. Her legs felt heavier with every step. The sound of her implant's soft clicks and grinding metal echoed in her ears. She was almost out of options. By the time she reached the 5th shop, her legs gave out. Sparks shot from the joints, and her knees hit the metal floor hard. Pain burned up her spine. She heard laughter from somewhere in the crowd. Lyra tried to push herself up, but her legs wouldn't respond. She stayed there, breathing hard, her hands flat against the cold floor. The crowd flowed around her as if she were just an obstacle to step over. Her vision blurred for a moment. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. She couldn't afford to look weaker than she already was. Then, through the noise of the spaceport, she heard a voice. A deep, steady voice. "You need a hand." She looked up. A human stood above her. His hair was dark, his jaw covered with a short beard, and his eyes were sharp but calm. He wore a tool belt with strange instruments hanging from its she recognized, others she didn't. My implants," she said, her voice trembling. "They're broken. I can't." The human crouched down, studying her legs without touching them. "Yeah," he muttered. "These are in bad shape. Whoever built them didn't expect them to last long." "I can't pay," she said quickly, already expecting him to turn away. Not even a little. But instead of leaving, he gave a small shrug. "I didn't ask for money." Her eyes widened. You'd fix them? For free?" He stood and held out a hand to her. "Yeah, I've got a workshop not far from here. You'll be walking again before the next ship cycle." She didn't take his hand right away. The spaceport was full of people who offered help only to demand something later. She had learned the hard way that kindness often had a hidden price. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" The human gave a half smile. "Because I can." Something in his tone made her believe him. Slowly, she reached up and took his hand. His grip was firm, and he pulled her to her feet with ease as they started moving. Through the crowd, she noticed how people stepped out of his way. He didn't seem dangerous, but there was something about him, something that made others think twice before crossing him. They passed neon signs, steam vents, and the hum of docking ships. The noise of the spaceport faded as they turned into a quiet side corridor. Her implants clicked with every step, but somehow the pain felt a little less sharp now. Maybe it was the hope, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Finally, they stopped in front of a small, dimly lit doorway. The human opened it and gestured for her to step inside. The smell of oil and metal hit her first. The walls were lined with shelves full of strange machines, wires, and glowing components. A workbench stood in the center, covered in tools. "This," he said, closing the door behind them, "is where broken things get another chance." For the first time that day, Lyra felt something warm in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, the impossible could be real. Lyra stepped further into the workshop, her eyes scanning the strange mix of order and chaos. Some shelves were perfectly neat, with tools lined up in size order. Others were stacked with messy piles of wires, gears, and glowing crystal shards. It looked like a place that had seen 1,000 repairs and 1,000 failures. The human moved toward the workbench, setting down a small bag he'd been carrying. Without looking at her, he spoke. "Sit on that table, the one with the blue mat. Don't move too much. Those implants look like they could snap if you put too much weight on them." She limped to the table, each step making her legs hiss and click. Sitting down felt like relief and defeat all at once. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. "Name's Kale," he said, still busy opening drawers. "Yours, Lyra." "All right, Lyra," Kale said, pulling a magnifying visor over his eyes. "Let's take a look at the damage." He knelt in front of her, studying the implants. His fingers brushed the metal lightly, searching for hidden seams and weak points. The light from his visor made tiny reflections dance across the dull plating. "These aren't just broken," he said after a moment. "They've been made to break." She frowned. "What do you mean, cheap parts?" "Overclocked processors. Weak joint casings. Whoever sold you these implants wanted you to come back for repairs again and again. That's how they keep you paying." Lyra's jaw tightened. She thought back to the clinic where she'd gotten them. The promises they'd made, the smile of the mechanic who had taken her last credits. Now she realized it had been a trap from the start. "I can't even afford one repair." She whispered. Kale set down his tools for a moment and looked up at her. "You don't need to afford it. You just need to let me work." She studied him for a moment, trying to read his face. His eyes weren't cold, but they weren't soft either. He seemed focused. Like fixing her legs was just another puzzle to solve. As he began unscrewing the outer panels, Lyra noticed something about his hands. They moved fast but carefully, the way someone's hands do when they've done this work hundreds of times before. "Why do you have so many alien parts here?" she asked, glancing around the room again. Kale gave a small laugh. "Because aliens keep making tech that breaks. I pick up the scraps, fix them, sell them, or use them for something new. People throw away a lot of good things just because they're not shiny anymore." There was something in his tone that made her wonder if he was talking about more than just machines. Suddenly, a loud pounding echoed from the metal door behind her. Kale froze for half a second before continuing to work. "Ignore it," he said. The pounding came again, harder this time, followed by a muffled voice in an alien language. Lyra caught enough of the words to understand the meaning. "Open the door. Hand over the girl." Her chest tightened. "Kale, who are they?" "Debt collectors," he said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Probably from the same people who sold you those implants. They don't like it when someone fixes their customers for free." Another slam shook the door. Lyra flinched. "Can't you just tell them I'm not here?" she asked, her voice low. Kale's lips curved into a half-smile. "Lyra, they already know you're here. That's why I'm working faster." Her heart pounded as she watched him. The visor reflected bright light, hiding his eyes, but his hands moved with steady confidence. He wasn't rushing out of fear. He was racing against time like it was just another tool in his kit. "You're not scared?" she asked. "I'm busy," he replied simply. The pounding stopped. Silence filled the room for a moment. broken only by the faint hum of a plasma cutter as Kale removed a corroded piece of her implant. Then, a scraping sound metal against metal as if someone was trying to force the door open. Lyra swallowed hard. What if they come in? Then I'll deal with it, Kale said, his voice still calm. But right now, your legs matter more. Something in his certainty made her chest feel strange. She didn't know this man, didn't know why he was helping her, but in that moment, she believed him. Kale reached for a small, glowing crystal from the workbench. It pulsed softly in his hand. This is from a scrapped Carthian engine, he explained. Strong enough to power a cargo loader. In your implants, it'll keep you running for decades, no replacements, no breakdowns. Her eyes widened. That sounds possible. Yeah, he said with a faint grin, but impossible is my favorite kind of job. The scraping at the door grew louder. Something heavy banged against it, bending the metal inward. Kale worked faster now, his hands a blur. Almost there, he muttered. Just keep talking, so I know you're not passing out. She took a shaky breath. I was supposed to dance in the Lunar Festival next month. That's why I got the implants in the first place. Now I can barely walk. You'll dance, Kale said, without hesitation. And when you do, I hope the people who made these junk implants are watching. The final panel clicked into place. He stepped back, pulling off the visor. Stand up, he said. She hesitated. The banging on the door was louder now. Pesky pushed herself off the table. Hey, and for the first time in months, her legs didn't shake. The pain was gone. Her breath caught. It works. Kale gave a satisfied nod. Good. Now let's see if we can get you out of here before our guests get too impatient. The door gave another loud groan, and the metal began to split. The metal door shuddered again, bending inward with a screech. Dust drifted down from the ceiling as the pounding grew louder and faster. Kale glanced at the door once, then back at Lyra's legs. Can you walk well enough to move fast? She nodded slowly, still amazed at the smooth motion of her implants. Yes, but where will we go? Out the back, he said, already moving toward a wall lined with stacked crates. Follow me when I say. The pounding stopped. For a moment, the silence was even worse than the noise. Then a voice came through the thin gap in the warped metal. It was deep, cold, and carried the weight of authority. Mechanic, open the door, and no one gets hurt. You have something that belongs to us. Lyra's stomach turned. She knew the tone people who spoke like that didn't ask. They took, Kale muttered under his breath, sliding one of the crates aside to reveal a narrow passage behind it. Funny thing, he called back, I don't remember you owning people's legs. There was a pause, then a laugh low and humorless. You're making a mistake, human. The door groaned again, this time from a different angle. Lyra heard the faint hiss of a cutting torch. The scent of burning metal filled the air. Kale's expression tightened, but his voice stayed even. Lyra, move. She slipped into the narrow passage, her new legs moving silently. The smooth motion was strange, almost like she was walking in a dream. Kale followed, pushing the crate back into place behind them. The passage was dim, lit only by a faint glow from the end. The walls were old, probably part of the original structure of the spaceport, built long before the new shops had been added. As they moved, Lyra whispered, They'll just keep coming, won't they? Yes, Kale said simply. You're proof that their scam can be beaten. That makes you dangerous to them. Her chest tightened. She hadn't asked for this kind of danger. She just wanted to walk again. But now she realized fixing her implants wasn't just about her, was a challenge to the entire system that kept people like her trapped. They reached the end of the passage, where a rusted hatch sat half buried in the wall. Kale knelt, pulling. a tool from his belt. Sparks lit the narrow space as he cut through the lock. From somewhere behind them came a crash, the sound of the workshop door giving way. Heavy boots hit the floor, followed by muffled voices. "They're inside, Lyra," whispered Cale. Didn't look up. "They won't search the walls right away. That gives us maybe a minute." The hatch gave a final squeal before swinging open. Cool, stale air rushed in. On the other side was a maintenance tunnel wide enough to walk through, but low enough that Cale had to duck his head. "Go," he said, stepping aside for her. She moved quickly, her footsteps light. The tunnel's floor was slick in places, coated with condensation. Pipes ran along the walls, humming softly. Behind them, faint echoes of shouting carried down the hidden passage. Lyra quickened her pace. "Where does this lead?" Over her shoulder, "To the old docking rings," Cale replied. "Half of them are sealed, but there's one I use for projects." Something in his tone made her curious, but she didn't ask. Right now, survival mattered more than questions. They turned a corner, and the tunnel widened into a small chamber with another hatch at the far side. Cale moved to open it but froze when they both heard it. The clanging of boots on metal. Coming from ahead, Lyra single quotes as heart dropped. "They're coming from both sides, looks like it," Cale said, scanning the room. "Then we improvise." He crossed to a tall pipe near the wall and twisted a valve hard. A deep rumble shook the chamber, followed by a rush of steam that began to fill the air. The mist thickened quickly, turning the room into a white blur. "What's that for?" Lyra asked, coughing lightly. "Cover," Cale said. "They won't see us move." The footsteps grew louder, but the steam masked their exact location. Cale grabbed Lyra's arm lightly and guided her toward a side tunnel she hadn't noticed before. They slipped inside just as the first shadowy figures appeared through the mist in the chamber behind them. The side tunnel was tighter, the walls lined with thick cables. It curved downward, and Lyra had to fight the urge to look back. After several minutes, they emerged into a dim space with a high ceiling. Old docking equipment hung from the rafters, covered in dust. A small weathered ship rested on the pad's strange mix of human and alien design. "This is your project?" Lyra asked, staring at it. Cale smiled faintly. "One of them, a teat, still flies." He moved quickly toward the ship, lowering the boarding ramp. "Get inside. We'll be clear once we're off this station." Lyra hesitated at the bottom of the ramp, glancing back toward the tunnel. She could hear the faint clang of pursuit getting closer. Cale's voice cut through her thoughts. "Lyra, move." She ran up the ramp, the sound of her new legs echoing against the metal. Inside, the ship was cramped but functional, every inch of space used for tools. Spare parts and storage got. Cale sealed the hatch behind them and sprinted to the cockpit. "Strap in," he said. "It might be a rough launch." As she buckled into a worn seat, the ship's engines roared to life. The vibrations hummed through her implants, strong and steady. Through the small cockpit window, she saw the docking bay doors begin to open and behind them, shadows appearing at the far end of the pad. The ship lifted just as the first blaster shot lit the air. The ship shook hard as it rose from the docking pad. Lyra gripped the seat's armrests, her heart pounding in her chest. Through the narrow window, flashes of light streaked past, blaster shots aimed at them. Cale kept his eyes forward, hands steady on the controls. "Hold on," he said, his voice calm but firm. A warning alarm beeped as two docking clamps stayed locked to the ship's underside. Cale's fingers flew across the controls. "They're trying to keep us grounded," he muttered. "Can't you just fly harder?" Lyra asked, her voice shaky. "That's not how physics works," Cale replied with a faint smirk. "This is." He reached for a lever and pulled it sharply. The ship's underside thrusters fired in short bursts, jolting them hard. There was a loud, metallic clangly sound of the clamps snapping free. The ship surged upward, sliding out through the opening doors of the docking bay. Behind them, she caught a last glimpse of shadowy figures spilling onto the pad, weapons in hand. Then the station's outer hull dropped away, replaced by the vast, star-filled darkness of space. Lyra let out a slow breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. We made it. Cale didn't answer right away. He kept checking the sensors. Not yet. They'll have pursuit ships in the air within minutes. Her stomach tightened again. How many? Enough to be a problem, Cale said. But this ship's not just patched together for looks. The control panel lit up with blinking signals, multiple small craft leaving the station, all heading their way. Lyra's eyes widened. That's a lot. Cale flicked a switch, and the ship's engines gave a deeper, throatier growl. Then we make it a race. The stars outside blurred as he pushed the ship into a high-speed run. The hull rattled under the sudden acceleration. Lyra felt herself pressed back into the seat, but her new implants absorbed the pressure with ease. The pursuing ships fanned out, some coming in fast from behind, while others tried to cut them off ahead. Cale adjusted their course slightly. See that debris field? He asked, pointing at a dark patch in space. Lyra squinted. At first, it just looked like empty blackness. Then, faintly, she saw the scattered glint of metal. What is it? Old freighter wrecks. Been floating out here for years, Cale said. Most pilots avoided tits too tight to navigate at speed. And you? I've been through it twice, he replied. Survived both times. So, let's make it 3. The pursuing ships fired again, bright streaks of plasma cutting through space. Cale twisted the controls, and their ship rolled sharply, dodging the shots by meters. Lyra clung to the armrests, her breath quick. They hit the debris field a few seconds later. Twisted hulls and broken engines drifted in the void, some pieces so large they blotted out the stars behind them. Cale weaved the ship between the wrecks, each turned so tight that Lyra was sure they'd scrape the hull. The pursuing ships followed, but not all of them. One clipped a piece of metal and spun out, disappearing into the wreckage. Another slowed. Wary of the narrow gaps, Cale's voice was steady. The trick is to move like the wreckage isn't there, but also like it's going to kill you if you get careless. That doesn't make sense, Lyra muttered. Exactly, Cale said, with a quick grin. A sudden alert beeped. One of the faster enemy ships had managed to match their movements, closing the gap. Lyra's chest tightened as she saw it on the display. Cale flipped another switch. Let's see if the impossible works twice. In one day, from the underside of the ship, 2 small pods detached, drifting back toward the pursuing craft. At first, Lyra thought they were mines, but when they exploded, it didn't destroy anything. They released a dense cloud of reflective particles. The enemy pilots swerved, sensors blinded. Their ship clipped another wreck and spun off, disappearing into the darkness. Cale's shoulders relaxed slightly. That's one more problem gone. The remaining ships were still behind, but farther now. They were losing ground in the maze of debris. Finally, the wreckage thinned and open space stretched ahead. Cale eased back on the throttle. We've got a window? They'll either turn back or try to follow us into open space, where I can outrun them. Lyra exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing for the first time since they left the station. You've done this before. Too many times, Cale said, but usually not with someone in the passenger seat. She studied him for a moment, still trying to understand why a man like him would risk so much for her. You didn't have to help me, she said quietly. He glanced at her briefly, then back to the controls. Yeah, I did. There was weight in his words, but he didn't explain. Not yet. The ship cruised into the shadow of a drifting asteroid, hiding them from the sensors of any pursuers still searching. Kale powered down the engines to a low hum. "We'll stay here for a few hours," he said. "Let them think we've jumped out of system." Lyra leaned back, feeling the hum of the ship beneath her. The fear wasn't gone, but something else had settled in: curiosity. She wanted to know who this human really was, and what debt he was paying by helping her. But for now, she stayed quiet, letting the silence of space wrap around them. The asteroid's shadow wrapped around the ship like a blanket, hiding it from the galaxy outside. The hum of the engines was faint, a steady heartbeat in the silence. Lyra sat in her seat, legs stretched out, still testing the smooth motion of her repaired implants. It felt strange, almost unreal. Hours ago, every step had been pain. She could move like she had before the damage. Maybe even better. Kale was at the workbench in the corner of the cockpit, tools spread out before him. He was cleaning them carefully, one by one, each movement precise. Lyra watched for a while before finally speaking. "You didn't just fix my implants," she said quietly. "You rebuilt them." Kale didn't look up. "Yeah. Why?" she asked. "You could have just patched them enough to get me moving." He set down a tool and finally met her eyes. "Because a patch would fail. And you've had enough of people giving you things that fail on purpose." Her throat tightened. She looked down at her legs, the soft glow of the upgraded circuits tracing smooth, steady lines along her skin. "I still don't understand. You don't know me. I'm not anyone important." Kale leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant for a moment. "Years ago, I was on a mining station out near the edge of mapped space. Bad job, worse pay. One day, a safety line snapped, and I went over the side of a platform, broke both legs. No way to climb back. I was done." Lyra leaned forward, listening closely. "Then this alien someone I'd never met pulled me up," Kale continued. "She was smaller than me, weaker than me, but she didn't let go. She stayed with me for hours until the med crew came. And when I thanked her, she just said, 'Pass it on.'" He gave a small shrug. "She didn't ask for credits. Didn't even tell me her name. I've been waiting for a chance to do the same for someone else." Lyra felt her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with fear or pain. "So that's it? You're helping me because someone once helped you?" Kale smiled faintly. "It's enough of a reason." For a while, neither of them spoke. The quiet was almost peaceful, till a faint beeping broke it. Kale's expression shifted instantly. He moved to the console and checked the scanner. "What is it?" Lyra asked, standing. "They didn't give up," Kale said. "One of their patrol ships is sweeping the asteroid belt. They'll be on us in under 10 minutes. Pulse quickened. "Then we have to move." "Not yet," Kale said, eyes narrowing. "If we leave now, they'll just follow. We need to make it so they can't follow." Lyra didn't know exactly what he meant, but she saw the look in his eyes, focused, calculating. She followed him as he opened a storage compartment under the floor. Inside were several small, round devices with blinking lights. "What are those?" she asked. "Pulse charges," Kale said. "They're not bombs, more like very loud distractions." He handed her one. It was warm in her palm, faintly humming. "We're going to plant these along the outer surface of this asteroid," he explained. "When they get close, the charges will go off, scatter the debris, and give us a window to escape." Lyra hesitated. "That sounds dangerous." "It is," Kale admitted. "But it's better than waiting to be boarded." They suited up quickly, pulling on light vacuum gear. Kale's suit was worn, but reinforced in key places. Hers looked like it had been salvaged and repaired more than once. The airlock hissed open, and the cold of space hit her through the suit's thin insulation. They stepped out onto the asteroid's rough surface, their boots locking magnetically to the rock. The stars stretched endlessly above, sharp and clear. Kale moved with confidence, securing each charge to the rock face. Lyra followed his lead, placing hers where he pointed. The asteroid's surface was uneven, and more than once she had to catch herself against a jagged edge. "You're moving well," Kale said over the comm. She glanced down at her legs and smiled faintly. "Feels like they were always mine." "The idea?" he said. They were halfway around the asteroid when Kale froze. "Contact," he said, sharply. Lyra turned and saw it a dark shape sliding into view from behind another asteroid. Its running lights blinked cold blue. The enemy patrol ship. "They're early," Kale muttered. "We need to finish and get back inside. Now." They moved faster, the rock crunching softly under their boots. Kale set the last charge and signaled her toward the airlock. The patrol ship was closing in, its weapons slowly rotating toward their position. Inside the airlock, Kale slammed the hatch shut and hit the controls. The room pressurized quickly, and they pulled off their helmets. "Strap in," Kale said, moving to the pilot's seat. Lyra slid into her chair just as the first pulse charge detonated outside. The asteroid shook, and a cloud of glowing debris scattered into space. The enemy ship swerved, its sensors struggling to make sense of the sudden chaos. Kale powered up the engines. "That's our opening." The ship launched from the asteroid surface, weaving through the debris field at high speed. Behind them, more charges went off, sending chunks of rock spinning in all directions. The patrol ship tried to follow, but one of the larger fragments clipped its hull, forcing it to pull back. As the stars ahead cleared, Kale set the course for deep space. "They won't follow us now," he said, finally leaning back. Lyra exhaled, her body relaxing for the first time since they'd suited up. "You just keep making the impossible real," she said. Kale gave a small grin. "It's a habit I can live with." For the next few hours, the ship glided through deep space on silent drive, its engines low to avoid detection. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her eyes on the endless stretch of stars ahead. It felt like they had finally left danger behind, but Kale didn't relax. His posture stayed straight, his eyes scanning the readouts over and over. "You're expecting something," Lyra said softly. He nodded. "The kind of people we just crossed, they don't quit. They can't catch us themselves. They'll send someone worse." Lyra's stomach tightened. "Worse." Kale tapped a control, and the display lit up with a faint signal in the distance. "See that? That's a long-range hunter. Faster than most ships. Can track a heat signature for days." The signal blinked on the screen, small but steady. Lyra stared at it. "So, they're already after us." "Yeah," Kale said, his tone flat. "We've got maybe 4 hours before they're on us." Her hands curled into fists. "And? If they catch us?" Kale looked at her briefly. "They won't, but we're going to have to take a risk." He switched the display to a star map. A red warning zone pulsed near the edge. "This is the Thorn Belt," he explained. "A mess of unstable asteroids, plasma storms, and magnetic interference. No sane pilot flies through it." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "And you want to?" Kale's mouth curved in a quick half-smile. "Sanity's overrated." He adjusted their course. Outside the window, the stars shifted as the ship turned toward a faint glowing haze in the distance. They reached the edge of the Thorn Belt in just under 2 hours. From here, it didn't look like a belt of asteroids at all. It looked like a storm frozen in space. Massive chunks of rock tumbled lazily, lit by flashes of blue-white lightning from plasma bursts. A haze of dust and magnetized particles hung in the air, making the whole field shimmer. Lyra stared at it. "That's beautiful. And terrifying." Kale's hands moved over the controls. "It's both." The storms mess with sensors, so we can hide in there? But one wrong move, and the storms will tear the ship apart. The hunter ship's signal on the display was closer now. Too close. Lyra could almost feel the pressure of it. "Hold tight," Kale said. The ship slid into the edge of the belt. Immediately, the hull rattled under the pull of competing gravitational fields. Static hissed over the comms, and the sensors flickered. Lyra gripped the seat, every muscle tense. Kale guided them through a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. A burst of plasma lit the space around them, making the cockpit glow white for a second. "You've done this before?" Lyra asked. "Once," Kale said. "Didn't like it much." They weaved between spinning rocks and streaks of lightning, the ship rolling and diving with precise movements. Kale's focus was absolute, his eyes tracking every hazard before. It could become a threat. Then Lyra saw a third dark silhouette of the hunter's ship slipping into the belt behind them. Even through the interference, its sleek shape was unmistakable. "They're still following," she said. "Yeah," Kale replied. "That's the thing about hunters, they don't care about the risk. And that means we have to be smarter than them." He flipped a switch, and several compartments on the ship's hull opened, releasing small reflective pods. They drifted away, each sending out a faint energy signal. "Decoys," Lyra guessed. "Good guess," Kale said. "They'll split the hunter's targeting systems." On the display, the hunter ship's path wavered as it tried to track multiple signals at once. For a moment, it slowed, but then it locked back onto their real trail. Kale muttered something under his breath and pulled the ship into a steep climb. They rose over a spinning asteroid the size of a city, skimming so close that the hull scraped against a jagged outcrop. The sound made Lyra's heart jump. "That's too close," she said. "That's exactly close enough," Kale replied, pulling them into a sharp dive. Below them, a cluster of plasma storms flashed, the air between them crackling like fire. Kale steered straight toward the center. Lyra's eyes widened. "You're not going through that, are you?" "Yes," Kale said simply. "Because no one else would." They plunged into the storm. Lightning danced across the hull, and the ship shook violently. Warning lights flared on the control panel, but Kale's hand stayed steady. The hunter ship followed, but the moment it entered the storm, a massive bolt of plasma struck its starboard wing. The ship spun wildly, vanishing into the haze. Lyra stared at the display, her breath caught. "Is it gone?" Kale checked the sensors, which were slowly clearing as they moved out of the worst of the storm. "Not destroyed. But they won't be following us for a while." Relief washed over her, but only for a moment. "So we're safe now?" Kale gave a small shake of his head. "Safe is a temporary thing, but we've bought time." He guided the ship toward a calmer patch of space inside the belt and powered down most systems, letting the ship drift in the magnetic haze. Lyra looked at him, still unsettled by how calm he was after everything. "You could have just left me back at the station. Why go through all this?" Kale's eyes stayed on the stars. "Because sometimes the right thing is the hard thing, and because one day you might be the one keeping someone else alive." The thorn belt lay quiet around them, its swirling storms and drifting rocks hiding their small ship from the galaxy beyond. The worst of the danger had passed. Kale sat in the pilot's chair, the dim glow from the console lighting his face, while Lyra stood by the viewport staring out at the endless expanse of stars. For the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. Her legs moved without pain. Her steps were steady, silent. It still didn't feel real. She turned toward Kale. "Where will you go now?" "Wherever the work takes me," he said simply, flipping a few switches to start a slow drifts toward the edge of the belt. There's always someone out there with a broken ship, broken gear, or broken luck. Lyra hesitated. And me. That's your choice, Kale said. I can drop you at a safe port, somewhere their kind won't bother looking. Or you can come along until you figure out your next move. The idea of leaving him, of walking away from the man who had risked so much for her, made her chest feel heavy. But part of her knew she couldn't stay forever. She had her own life to rebuild. What you did for me, she began, then stopped, unsure how to put it into words. It's not just the implants. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Kale looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then use it. Don't waste it. They reached a small, unmarked trading station 2 days later. From the outside, it looked like little more than a cluster of cargo modules stuck together, spinning slowly in space. No banners, no traffic lanes, no official patrols. This is Haven Dock, Kale explained as they approached. It's quiet. You can disappear here if you want to. Lyra studied the station as they slid into a docking port. Hello, you. Do after you drop me off? Kale smiled faintly. Find the next job, or maybe it'll find me. The docking clamps locked onto the ship with a dull thud. The airlock hissed open, and the warm scent of cooked food and engine oil drifted in. The sound of distant voices echoed down the corridor. Lyra stepped out first. Her new legs carried her smoothly over the metal floor. The steady hum of the implants like a promise with every step. Kale followed, his tool bag slung over his shoulder. They walked together through the narrow halls until they reached the stations. Main concourse, a wide space filled with traders, mechanics, and travelers from dozens of worlds. This is where we part, Kale said quietly. Lyra turned to face him. She wanted to say something big, something that would match what he'd done for her, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you." He nodded once. "Pass it on." She watched him turn and walk toward a line of docking bays. Part of her wanted to run after him, but she stayed where she was. This was her step to take alone. As she turned to find a place to stay, she heard raised voices from the far side of the concourse. A young alien boy, no more than 12, stood in the middle of the crowd, clutching a small, broken hoverboard. His eyes were wide, frightened. Around him, 2 larger aliens shouted at him, demanding payment for repairs he clearly couldn't afford. Lyra's single quotes. Chest tightened. She saw herself in him alone, out of options, with no one willing to help. Without thinking, she crossed the space and stepped between the boy and the angry traders. "I'll take care of it," she said firmly. The traders hesitated, sizing her up. Then, muttering under their breath, they walked away. The boy stared at her. You'll fix it." "I'll find someone who can," Lyra said, smiling faintly. "And you won't have to pay." The boy's eyes lit with relief. "Why?" he asked. She thought of Kale, of the look in his eyes when he told her about the alien who had once saved him. "Because someone did the same for me," she said. That night, Lyra found a small workshop on the edge of the station and paid a local mechanic to repair the hoverboard. She stayed long enough to watch the boy try it out, his laughter filling the air as the board lifted smoothly off the ground. When he turned to thank her, she simply said, "Pass it on," and walked away. Days later, Kale's ship drifted through another quiet stretch of space. He was working at his bench when the comms console beeped. A short message came through, unsigned, "She's walking, and she's passing it on." Kale read it twice, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He set the message aside, picked up his tools, and got back to work. Somewhere out there, another broken thing was waiting to be fixed, and in a galaxy full of traitors, thieves, and people who turned away from the desperate, there were still a few who believed that kindness was worth the risk. And sometimes that was enough to make the impossible real.